What's up, YouTube? Kristo here, and I've got another review for you. This is a big one. Not only is this breaking into my top 3 for my niche for spring 2016, it's also talking about one of the most beautiful fragrances I have ever smelled from one of my all-time favorite niche fragrance houses. This is Une Rose from Frederic Malle. Before I get into the review, I want to talk about very quickly, talking about reformulations, takeovers. Estee Lauder recently, in the last couple of years, purchased Frederic Malle, and Estee Lauder is definitely a fragrance house or a fragrance parent company that has a bad reputation for making the companies they buy kind of follow their guidelines. They make them adjust to what they want. And unfortunately, it seems that often that means a lot of really interesting or potential fragrance niche houses end up being kind of manipulated and changed and altered to the point where they're so different from what they used to be that people kind of lose interest in them. And unfortunately, in my limited experience, that's kind of what's happening with Frederic Malle. Now, I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I've even got a little Estee Lauder era sample here of Une Rose that I really need to talk about, but we'll do that a little bit later. Now, my bottle here is from the pre-Estee Lauder, but the era with the white stamped cap, okay? And again, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm going to talk about this, and believe me, there is a major difference between this and what's in this, okay? So my review's coming from this. I can't speak about newer formulations or, post Estee Lauder takeover. Notes for this, as you guessed, it's obviously a lot of rose. This is meant to be a solifleur, which is a single floral note that's highlighted and kind of exaggerated or just put out in the open to be the most dominant note. Often when you get florals, they will have numerous florals that will work together to create kind of a blend of floral notes. But this is a solifleur, which means that the rose or the single floral is highlighted. Now, other than the single floral note, the rose, I do also get the red wine note, especially in the opening. I get geranium, I get some honey, I definitely get some earthy rootiness, some vetiver in the dry down. The thing with this is it is so complex and it basically never stops changing, which is just exactly why this is such a masterpiece. I'm going to say it is. That's why this is expensive. It's made by a competent house, or it was made by a competent house with a very competent perfumer. And to me, this kind of shows the difference in quality between kind of a mid or low-end niche fragrance and a high-end niche fragrance. What this reminds me of, and remember as well, this changes so much. It's so hard to describe in one little analogy what it smells like. But for the most part, what this reminds me of is a glass of really dark red wine, just stuffed, overflowing with red rose petals, like just super lush rose petals, like overflowing in the glass. Now, even though there are other notes and accords that I get in this, one thing that really surprised me when I smelled this, because I'd only smelled the sample first, the opening of this has this outrageous, unbelievable, like black petrochemical feel, which I don't want to make sound bad because it's actually pretty amazing. It's just so different, like compared to my sample here. Uh, the perfumer, his vision for this, and this is the reason I can't really steal it, because this is one case where I cannot argue with the perfumer's vision, and they actually make a point of letting you know what the perfumer envisions. If you go to the Frederic Malle website, each fragrance will have a video with the perfumer of each fragrance, talking about each specific one and telling you what they were thinking of, what they were trying to do. And I love that so much, because it's just showing you it's not just some quick gimmick where they tell you a little shtick and then you go, oh yeah, that's what it is. They actually do this in depth, aiming and achieving their goal. So the perfumer basically is taking the idea that this is a fresh red rose plucked from a rose garden. So you get the red rose petals, you get the leaves, you get the stem, you get the roots, and you get some earth when it's been pulled out of the ground. And, without plagiarizing and ripping off his words, I can't say it any better. So for my analogy with the dark, dark red wine with rose petals stuffed in, that's kind of like what it reminds me of the most in a short period of this fragrance's life. In terms of performance on this, it lasts as long as you can go without showering again. Kind of like I said with Honor. This is like 20 hours approximately, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. I guess it depends your climate, how much you sweat, what kind of clothes you wear. But yeah, this is like 20 hours on me. Pretty easily without effort. It lasts on my clothes forever. It lasts on my skin forever. I can't say it's like jumping off me for that entire 20 hours, but I can still easily pick this up on myself. Projection is good. And again, kind of like Honor, something I really like about this is even though it is so long lasting, it isn't overpowering. Which for me, I get a bit neurotic, maybe a bit self-conscious about myself when I'm in kind of more confined areas that people are kind of annoyed by my fragrances. Season, yeah, spring. And I think because this is so complex, it fits every occasion you can even imagine in spring. It's kind of soft, clean, and comforting at times, but then it's kind of dark, mysterious, earthy, slightly even animalic at times. This could be worn casual, it could be worn formal, it could be worn after the shower, before going to bed. It fits everything. Gender for this, if you're into rose, check it out. That's pretty much all I'm gonna say. There are kind of elements that would be masculine, and there's elements that would be feminine, but they're just brought together and put together in such a perfect way that to me nothing really stands out as long as you're into rose fragrances. Price for this one, this is the big one. This is where it gets kind of hard to take, after calling it, a flawless masterpiece, which it is in my opinion. The price in this is pretty steep. In the United States, you're looking about $365 before shipping or tax or anything like that. In Canada, it's a whopping 585 Canadian dollars, which actually works out to be more than $100 above the US price when converted into Canadian dollars for the 100 ml bottle here. There is a 50 ml bottle, but again, it's kind of in that similar ratio. Often when you get niche or exclusive fragrances in Canada, they're usually about the same, maybe even a little bit lower, but once you add tax in, usually works out to the point where to have it shipped in from the United States or Europe, it would end up being about the same, if not maybe even a bit more. This one, though, completely different story. As of now, the only place in Canada you can buy this is Holt Renfrew, and they're asking $585 retail plus tax. So you're looking at well over 600 Canadian dollars for a 100 ml bottle of this. If you have connections or if you have the ability to get this shipped in from the United States, I would highly recommend it. You would probably save nearly 100 Canadian dollars to get the same size, exactly same bottle. Now, I want to talk about packaging and reformulations and stuff like that. Usually I don't get into this because I don't really buy into a lot of the vintage reformulation hype nonsense, but this is definitely a fragrance where the quality is so high you can actually tell. Kind of sidetracked here, but I want to mention this before I forget. When I hear people talk about how flawless masterpieces are from like the mid-range designer world, and I think about this and I smell this fragrance, it just makes me want to slap them in the face and tell them they don't know anything about perfume. This is an example of where perfume being reformulated does turn into an atrocity, when it does turn into something that is unfortunate. I have a sample here that is definitely after Estee Lauder takeover. This was the first sample, the first place that I really smelled this, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. And I ended up finding someone selling a bottle of this online for a very good price. So I bought it, not really knowing much about it, not knowing much about formulations and, pre-post Estee Lauder takeover. I got this in the mail and I sprayed it. And it was so different. I actually thought for a minute it might either be fake or refilled with something else. Not saying that it's bad, but it was just so starkly different from my sample. And I have them both on again now. They're just not even comparable. The sample that I have on this hand, it completely lacks like the first 2 or 3 hours of this fragrance. So the kind of black petrochemical wine feeling that I get out of this, red wine feeling, is just missing on this. Basically, it just kind of cuts to like a nice polite rose with a bit of geranium that goes into like kind of a semi-earthy dry down. This has that plus way more. There's so much depth. It stands up so boldly off my skin that this doesn't. And there's so many fragrances I've heard of that have been reformulated, but people talking about these garbage mid-range designers that get reformulated every couple months. This is one that actually matters to me. I would intentionally go out of my way to find a pre-Estee Lauder formulation of this. Now, quickly, to talk about the different eras, there are a few different eras of this type of bottle that have the Editions Parfum Frederic Malle cap like this, where it's printed in white. Hopefully you can see that. Now, the older style bottles have the debossed info that runs around the outside of the cap. I actually prefer these. I like these older caps like this. Other than that, the bottles are virtually the same. There are slight differences in terms of the text and the fonts and stuff. But other than that, the only real huge noticeable differences are the caps. And I would, like I said, honestly go out of my way to try to find a pre-Estee Lauder formulation, because what they did in the sample here is pretty appalling. And I've actually had that as well for my Dante bra here. The first time I tried the newer Estee Lauder sample, I liked it. I bought the bottle, and I got it in the mail. And it was just like completely different. I didn't even recognize the fragrance. Again, I had to like check to make sure that it wasn't fake or refilled or something. And of course it's not. But when I smelled it for the first time, it was just so dramatically different. I was in shock and I couldn't believe it. So I actually, again, this one here, I'm in love with the Dante Bra, the new one. Again, it's kind of like they just added an extra 4 hours in the opening in the mid that don't exist in my Dante Bra Estee Lauder era sample. Now, again, I want to talk about the packaging on this. I don't usually get into packaging, but they just totally did it right here. What you get basically when you buy Frederic Malle perfume, they'll keep the bottles in a fridge or a cooler, and then they'll have a standard kind of bookcase box like this, and then they'll have a specific kind of sleeve here. So this will actually say Une Rose. It'll have the perfumer's name, Edouard Fleischer, and then what they do, they take the bottle, put it in the box, throw the sleeve on, and that's what you get, which is really cool because very few fragrance houses will actually take the time and consideration to do something like that. Since I've been introduced to Frederic Malle, like properly introduced to Frederic Malle, I have become madly in love with the house. My earliest experiences were with Musc Ravageur and the hype around that about 4 years ago, and I actually ended up getting a bottle sent to me by a subscriber, and I hated it. I didn't like it. And I ended up selling it to someone, and then for years, like 2 years, all I saw for sale from Frederic Malle on Facebook groups was Citrus Bigarade, and everybody was selling it. People would buy it and sell it in a couple weeks, and just nothing else. There was nothing else for sale. Everyone was hyping up Musc Ravageur. Everyone was selling Citrus Bigarade. It actually kind of put me off the house because I didn't like Musc Ravageur at all, and the notes, what people were describing Citrus Bigarade as, didn't appeal to me, and then the fact that everybody was selling it, nobody wanted the bottles, really put me off. And then Eugene, my fragrance friend, took me to the boutique in Holt Renfrew in Toronto, and it just totally changed my mind on the entire house. Sadly, though, for the most part, unless you do some digging around and buying used and doing a lot of research, you're probably going to get the newer Estee Lauder formulations, which in my opinion are simply just not worth the retail price. These are masterpiece perfumes put together by master perfumers that were run or managed, operated, owned by a house that wants to spend as much money as it takes to make a masterpiece. And I love that so much. It's kind of sad, but I suppose you can't blame Frederic Malle. He was probably handed an obscene amount of money and can probably retire even more comfortably now. I guess it just means that these earlier masterpieces are just going to be more and more coveted, and I am very, very happy to own not just this, but several other masterpieces from Frederic Malle from the pre-Estee Lauder era. So positives for this one, well, it is just one of the most, if not the most amazing rose fragrance I have ever smelled in my life. The complexity in this is mind-boggling, and not to the point where it's just like there's 100 notes thrown in that just randomly kind of bounce around and just, I can't stand that kind of stuff. This one is perfectly orchestrated. It's flawlessly made by a master perfumer for a fragrance house that used to truly care about the quality of its fragrances. It is exclusive. It's very exclusive. You are not just going to run into, some random person on the street that is wearing Une Rose. There's very little chance to that. It's beautiful. It's an amazing fragrance that I truly, genuinely love. Negative sides to this, the price. It is way too expensive, especially in Canada. Over 600 Canadian, that's just too much. That's way too much for a fragrance, especially with the newer Estee Lauder era. I can't justify spending that. The older bottles as well, ironically enough, when you're getting the older, better vintage pre-formulation, it was cheaper, and now the price is jacked up. Exclusivity, unless you live in a few select parts of the world, you're probably going to have to buy this online, and you're probably going to have to pay a premium. If you're not into rose, definitely try this first. It is very expensive for a blind buy, especially for someone who's not a fan of rose. If you end up getting a Estee Lauder formulation version, thinking that you're getting something yeah, I'd be pretty pissed off too, because it really, really doesn't stand up. There's no comparison really between these two. Overall, I think this is truly something I would not hesitate to call a masterpiece. It's flawlessly put together. The transitions, the complexity are just unparalleled in this fragrance's kind of zone or realm. There's really nothing I can think of that is around $3 to $4 that can even begin to compare to this. So, after talking over the moon about this, I want to hear what you think. What are your thoughts of Une Rose? Do you like it? Hate it? Think it's okay? Overpriced? Good? Not good enough? Etc. etc. So be sure to let me know, and stick around for number 2 coming up soon. Thanks for watching, everyone.